this. Okay, here. Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or our more shortened title, IPA USA. IPA USA is a USA affiliate of International Play Association, and you can find all about both IPA USA and IPA World by visiting our website at ipausa.org. Up in that top right-hand corner, you'll find links to our Facebook page where you can be a friend, our YouTube channel where you can subscribe, our Instagram where you can follow, and our Spotify account. And if you do any of those things, magically, each Monday morning, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch today is Suzanne Axelsson. Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Also
Suzanne,
on the board of the International Play Association here in Sweden.
Oh, there you go. Yes, absolutely. Suzanne is a pedagogical consultant and play activist working part-time in Stockholm University on the early years program about play. She's an international consultant with a focus on democratic pedagogy, safe and brave spaces for all children, and risky play. Her books include The Original Learning Approach, Play, Learning, and Teaching are all interwoven as equals. And she can also be found on Substack, which I had never heard of, in social media under her name or as Interaction Imagination, which I have heard of. So today, Suzanne's going to talk to us about being play responsive versus being play based. And boy, is that a topic I think we all struggle with.
I think I'll start with saying I'm not a versus kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a and kind of person.
Okay, I like that. Yes.
Because I don't think we should, I think teaching should be play-based.
Mm-hmm.
But our play-based teaching should be a response to the children's play. So this is why it's an and.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. So talk to us about what you envision when you talk about being play responsive.
So part of the original learning approach is that there is kind of this loom where the warp threads are play and the teaching are the weft threads. Mm-hmm. And playfulness can be found in our teaching, but teaching can never be found in the play. And for us to be really good at our jobs as teachers, I think it's important that we observe how children are playing. My husband's a neuroscientist. So when I asked him about why do we play, what is play, he answered from a brain point of view. And he said, well, play is the brain's way to adapt to a complex world. We never stop playing. How we play is going to change. Like, I don't need to play mummies and daddies anymore because it's been my reality. I live it. So how we play will change because how we're adapting to the world is constantly changing. So as teachers, to be able to understand how each child's brain is working, both as an individual and collectively in a group, we need enough time to observe how they're playing. And our observations of their play will then inform how we need to teach.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I mean, just those words are golden. And I think sometimes because we feel so much pressure, we do it the opposite way.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. So I'm playifying teaching or the academics rather than schoolifying play.
Yes.
So I always start from the play, and then I will start working out, well, what can I do to ensure that this play really works? Mm-hmm. Because play requires knowledge for the imagination. Mm-hmm. Play requires all sorts of skills for the children to be able to do what they want to do, whether it's jumping from the highest heights or being socially interactive with others or engaging in storytelling or doing science experiments. There's all sorts of things that they're doing naturally in their play. And what we can do in our teaching then is giving them the bits of knowledge that they need so they can be independent then in their play, But I think also what is really, really vital is that we're working on the social skills. A lot of my teaching, especially in the early years, is what do the children need to be able to play autonomously? How do I need to set up the environment so they don't need to be looking for me for permission all the time, and I don't need to be scared about saying, how do I keep them protected? The environment's doing that for me. And then I'm also thinking about what skills do they need to practice? Is it self-regulation? Is it language skills? Is it learning how to take turns? All of these different things. And then my teaching will have what the curriculum says, but also using what the children need to practice so that their play becomes more and more autonomous and basically needs me as little as possible.
Well, I think the beautiful part of what you're describing is that it's organic, right? So children are authentically choosing where to play, who to play with, how long to stay there, when to move on. But the teacher is such a keen observer that they're able to offer support when asked. They're able to be a play partner when invited. They're also, I think, through those observations, being able to say, oh, so and so couldn't do that last week. Let me make a note of that. And then what other things can I provide in a prepared environment that will foster that interest? And it's more authentic and meaningful to children versus saying, okay, today we're going to learn this. Instead of following what children are interested in knowing more about.
Well, basically, today we're learning this. This should have come from the children. So I know with a reasonable certainty of about 90% that this is going to be something the children are wanting to do. Every once in a while, a curveball will come and they're just not in the mood, and it kind of flops, and you kind of know, okay, this is not going to work. I'm not going to be able to teach them anything today because they're not going to receive it. I think teaching is like gift giving. If we don't know what the receiver wants as a gift, they're not going to enjoy it. We're taking a huge chance. It is so much better to know what kind of gift they want to receive and how they would like it packaging, and then also to be totally happy when they prefer the packaging over the contents every once in a while too.
Of course. Yeah, because again, that's genuine and authentic for children. And so, it's always interesting to me when teachers say, well, we have a theme every month, and that's the theme that we plan all of our curriculum around. And then they get frustrated when children have no interest in whatever the theme might be, or maybe they've had it so many times in their short little lives that it's no longer new or fresh or interesting. So I think that's the other trap that we sometimes fall in. We think we have to have a curriculum that we follow and guide to be sure that we feel like we're teachers versus seeing our role differently in crafting the curriculum based on where children are in their interests. And not every child is going to be in the same place in their.
And I think it's tricky because as a teacher, because I mean I've worked as an early years teacher and in schools as well for a long time, so I know my role as a teacher. And in the original learning approach, I talk about we have 3 roles. We have teacher, we have play worker, and then we also have facilitator. And as play worker, my main focus is taking care of the play. I'm not taking care of the children, I'm taking care of the play, because I know if the play works, the children are going to be okay. If the play is not flowing, then I know there's going to be some problems. As a teacher, I am working on with the child, each individual child and the group as well, so that each child can evolve physically, emotionally, cognitively, and socially. And then as a facilitator, I'm somewhere in between. And it's like a spectrum from sometimes I'm mostly play worker to the point of then eventually being play worker, and then to the other end, I'm mostly teacher. And my focus is finding learning flow and play flow. So it's sometimes a lot of holding hands, and sometimes it's just a little finger, and sometimes it's just being behind them kind of thing until they're independent and they're doing it all on their own. But I think I am an educator. That is my title. And therefore I do lessons. I do follow a curriculum, but my curriculum is informed by the children's play.
Yes.
So, and I think
Because
sometimes people think that it's one or the other, that we don't have a curriculum if we're being play responsive. It's no, we still have this responsibility, and we still have all of these policies and these demands that we can follow. But by having these three roles, we can start thinking about where is the balance so that children are getting adequate, proper, autonomous play, and we're not classifying play-based teacher-led activities as play, because I think we're doing an injustice to our way of teaching and also to the children who need an access to autonomy. So yeah.
And choice. And I think that, it goes back to your and piece. Yes, you have a curriculum and it is informed by the children, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different way of looking at how we develop curriculum or where we get our curriculum. And I think one of the most, I love those three roles because I think they are very helpful. In the US, we are not as informed on play work. So can you kind of give them, I think they've got the other two roles fine, but not that we do them, but they understand them internally. But can you give a little bit more information on the play workers' role? Because I think that's an important piece when you're observing children of what to do in particular situations, and instead of interfering or taking over. So I think that play worker is just as important as the other two, and I love this.
Absolutely. I think for me, I think it's vital, and I think it's vital throughout the ages. And I don't think this should be just for the early years. I think it's something that teachers in schools all the way up to high school need to fully understand how the children's brains are actually engaging with the world. And the best way of doing that is observing children's play. At the magpies wanting to join in the conversation.
That's lovely, magpies. You're welcome.
So a play worker, it originates from Lady Allen back at the end of the Second World War, who visited a adventure playground in Copenhagen called Emdrup, which was called a skrammellekeplads, junkyard playground. And basically it was Sørensen who designed this. He's an architect, but he designed a space where children had freedom to play and adults weren't concerned about things getting broken or having to look in a specific way. It gave children freedom. So I call it an aesthetic of play, or a play aesthetic, because it's not like this beautiful way of sometimes how I think a lot of preschools starting to look the same. With a certain way of how they put their paints and how they present the materials and things. And I think that's a learning aesthetic rather than a play aesthetic.
Exactly.
So she took back this idea of this junk playground to England, and they developed the role of the play worker. So people who were working there who could safeguard the play. Ensure that adults and other things were not, and other people's agendas and political agendas and adult agendas were not interfering with the children's play flow. And so basically it's being brave enough to not interfere with children's play. It is about interacting, where interacting is also not doing anything. So we, as you mentioned before, if we're invited in, we step in. We intervene always to ensure safety, but we avoid interfering as much as possible. And I say as much as possible because we're human and we will make mistakes and we'll misinterpret the play cues that the children have, or we might trample through a play frame that we haven't noticed and destroy plays by accident. and either through words or our actions. So, and I think it's important that we acknowledge our humanness and that our mistake making there, but try and learn from them through reflective practice. They have 8 principles. So basically talking about what play is, the need to constantly be researching and finding out what is happening, to be advocating for play, and to acknowledge the intrinsic nature of children's play, and that our role is there to be a kind of guardian of play, not a guardian of children, a guardian of the play.
And I think that's the most perfect definition, being a guardian of the play, not the protector, even though we will, of course, jump in if there's a hazardous situation. But it is a different frame than I think in some cultures, and in the US in particular, we're so overly safety conscious, right? That it is really difficult. Teachers are said, children can't go up the slide. They have to only go down the slide. Or there's no running on the playground because children might fall. And I'm like, oh my, the things that we do with good intentions, always with good intentions to protect children, is in many cases harming their development because they're not learning how to be safe.
No.
Which
There's a
is
lot of things we have to test for ourselves and know for ourselves. And it is impossible. I've been looking into a lot of Indigenous knowledge as a way of kind of decolonizing my understanding of what play is and of what education is. And there were 2 words in one of the Sami languages. Sami are the Indigenous people of Sapmi, which is in the north of Scandinavia. So it's the modern day borders of Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Russia. And they had this idea that we know about, so we know of, but then we get to know, really understand. And so that basically you can learn about snow by reading it in a book and watching films, but you don't understand snow until you've actually played in it and played in all the different kinds of snow. Because I think it blew my mind when I moved to Sweden, because I'm originally from England, and I came to Sweden, and for the first time in my life I discovered that there was snow you couldn't make snowmen out of, because it was so cold it's like powder, and I'd never experienced that snow, and it blew my mind. And I said, well, what's the point of snow then? And every single person looked at me, well, skiing. So it was like, for me, my only knowledge of snow was the kind of that squeezes together and you can make into balls and snowmen. So it was really interesting that my knowledge of snow was still very limited, and that we have to really get involved with things and do things and play things and mess about with things to have a real, true, full understanding.
And so when we're thinking about this continuum, people are going to want to say, well, when am I doing what role, right? Because you gave me a continuum and you told me there are 3 roles on the continuum, but I don't know what hat I'm going to put on, when I'm going to put it on. And so we would hope that it's the children that are driving the role that we take on, but I'm not sure some people might understand what that might look like. Can you give a scenario or an example?
I think it's impossible to say when and how much of each role we should be doing, because sometimes we might be with a group of children who they can play very well on their own, but struggle to play together. And therefore they might need more facilitation to give them the skills that they need to play independently. And if we were to go hands off, then they would not be able to have these skills to play independently and autonomously, because that's the goal. So a little bit of intervention in that sense is going to give them a lifetime of autonomy.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm after. So it's impossible to say how much. I think what is important is to always think, does that feel right? Do children have enough autonomy? When we think about autonomy, is essential for every human's well-being. Does the children in this group have enough autonomy? Play is the language of children's autonomy. That's how they express it. So if children are genuinely playing, they're being autonomous. So my rule of thumb is I want to make sure that I am play worker as much as possible. I am facilitator when needs to be. And I am teacher only when I need to be. I teach every single day. I would have a lesson every single morning that was informed by the children's play, and the children know it because during their play sometimes they would turn around and say, you need to take a photograph or you need to write this down because blah blah. They knew because I told them that when I'm watching you play, it's so that I can learn how to be a better teacher. So they took this job very seriously of when they remembered. Sometimes they get carried away in their own play and they don't remember. So they took that quite seriously. So my teaching could be anything from 10 minutes to an hour because my main concept of being a teacher was that I would teach for as long as I needed, but it was gradually going more and more into being a facilitator, and my best lessons would go into play. So I was kind of transitioning from teacher to facilitator to play worker, and that would be a quality lesson for me because then the children were in learning flow. Only it's hard to know whether it was learning flow or play flow, but the flow, they were autonomous in their learning, and they were experiencing it like play.
And I love how you describe that because it's not necessarily that today I'm going to be a play worker for 8 hours and a facilitator for 1 hour and a teacher for 2 hours, right? In a long day. No, that it is, again, authentic and organic based on what is happening in the classroom. And when you understand based on the children's interactions or on their individual development or whatever it is, you understand, oh, I need to go help facilitate this conversation or this disagreement, or you know what, they've learned this, and so I'm going to sit here and watch and see how I'm going to give them time to solve it before I become a facilitator. And so it's this nuance of really understanding yourself, but mostly trusting the children, right, to show you which role it's time for you to take on. And I think that is totally different from what many people believe an educator is.
Yes.
That, it's, and we get so confused and conflicted when we know children need to play, and we know that the play should be autonomous, and we know that they should be able to choose where to go and what to do and how long to stay there and who to play with. When we feel like there's a lesson that we need to teach that will extend whatever it is that we think they may be ready for, maybe you then become the educator and read a book about something that they've expressed interest in.
Yes.
Or you bring in more materials and prepare the environment for things they've
it's very vital that we take delight in children's play, that we're not just kind of not giving it value. And I think our body language can say a lot. I think it's also important that when we see play that we don't like, that we approach it with curiosity to find out what's going on before we pass judgment, because I think sometimes we're a little bit too quick to judge negatively what children are doing, and we look at their play as behavior first rather than saying, okay, why are they needing to do this? What's happening? And sometimes it might be behavior, it might not be play. And that's why it's so important to be curious first and then to find out, okay, why isn't this child be able to access play and they can only behave instead? Because a child who is behaving instead of playing is either too tired or too stressed, doesn't have the skills of self-regulation or be able to communicate. There's a whole lot of reasons why. So every child has the right to play. Some children need a little bit more help to access those rights. And if we don't help them, then I think, it's law in Sweden. The UN Rights of Children are law, and Article 31 is rest, play, and leisure. then we are technically breaking the law here in Sweden if we are not supporting each child to access play.
And of course, we've signed the convention, but we have not ratified
it, yeah.
in the US. And so I think we struggle with all those pressures that are coming down that says you have to get them ready, you have to get them ready, you have to get them ready. And so that's when we try to make play purposeful or more structured when that's not play. And so I think it's that whole definition of what play is and is not, which is what we try to do in the US to help people understand. If you're saying, I'm going to open up blocks, housekeeping, and the sensory table, and you can choose where to go, that is not play. And so it's because the adult made those decisions and didn't give the children the autonomy to do that.
And then even worse, you'll say only 5 people in this place, 6 people in that place. And then, you know, some children never get to choose where they are because it's always full. And where is their choice?
Yeah, it's a struggle, I think, for people who are feeling like their, you know, parents are like, I want my children to be ready for whatever is coming. And we know that what's coming isn't aligned with where children are developmentally, and certainly not best practice. And
but it is a systemic problem. I mean, this is not always the problem of the teachers, because the teachers are, I think, are always doing their best with the situation they're given. They're given too small spaces for the number of children they've got. And if you have too small a space, then children don't have the freedom to play in that. They are constantly limited. Their play frames are too small for it to actually be. They're constantly being annihilated. Oh, that word's not coming out right. Destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there isn't the space. Somebody else's play will come into and crash it into them. Or we've designed classrooms so that there's no open area, there's little compartments in each little compartment. And I think I understand why we're doing this is because the room doesn't say run, and it creates little nooks and crannies for children to hide in, which are essential. But there is no space for big play. And I think it's children need all kinds of play. And if our spaces are saying this kind of play is not applicable here, then we need to think about, well, where can they play that kind? And can I take them there? Or can we redesign our space every once in a while and push all of the things to the side and say, today we're going to play really big. And even if it's just once or twice, the children will think it's amazing to have that opportunity to see the same space in a new way. It's like what you were saying before. I mean, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, the children lose interest. But if we change the room temporarily for a short time, that's one of the things I was amazed at when I was in Vietnam and I was going to the community-run schools, the state-run schools. They had a lot of furniture that could all be folded away and pushed to the sides. Nice. And I thought that was so cool. I mean, there was a lot of the other things that I thought, oh, that's not quite valuing play in the same way, but it was valuing children in a different way. And I think each place has their limits and their gifts. And I think sometimes we can look at these places and go, oh, that's something we could really take in and think about how can we make our spaces changeable so that we can meet these different needs and not be limited to the same kind of play in small groups. And
and you know, if you have 20 children who want to, I had that one time in a 3-year-old room one time, everybody wanted to play in blocks. And I mean, I had a nice group of blocks. I probably had 300 blocks, but 20 children and 300 blocks is not enough. And you know, we had our centers, but that's why those shelves are on wheels. You can move them out and make places bigger and things smaller where children aren't as interested that day. And I we had wall phones back then because I'm old. I got on the phone to my director and I said, I need all the blocks that are in the teacher's supply closet. And she said, well, there's like 300 in there. I said, I need them all. And she came in and everything had been moved back, and all the children were in blocks. And she said, "Are you going to be okay?" I said, "I think so," because she brought me more. But that was it.
Yeah.
And that play scenario was there for, I want to say they just wanted to play in blocks
Mm,
for a couple of weeks. And
mm,
I brought in, as a teacher or as a facilitator, you're thinking, maybe I could put a short little table in there and they could build
mm.
some blocks up on the table and under the table. And I didn't tell them what to do. I just,
You
you
just
know,
kind of slide it in there.
get away and see what happens. And that was so rewarding and
Mm,
fun
yes.
that they were able to explore and build, and they were so happy. And
Mm.
then they went, to dramatic play and got some dolls and brought them over and made doll houses. And then they went to the sensory table and took some things out of that. And that
A
was
little
all
bit of cross-pollination.
absolutely. And oh my goodness, it
Mm,
was it was the best documentation panel I ever did, because
mm,
I was taking pictures all the time and parents were like, "Oh my goodness, they were really into this." I
mm.
said, "Yes."
And that's the thing, when they're really into it, the depth and the breadth of the learning is just amazing, is absolutely amazing. You
It
can't get
exploded.
that kind when you're doing just the teaching and the children are only like vaguely interested. It has to that real, has has to come from inside. They're intrinsically motivated to learn. And I think children all come intrinsically motivated to learn. But
Absolutely.
what we're doing as adults is often killing off that motivation
Mhm.
and making learning, which should be a beautiful thing, we're turning learning into a boring chore.
Yes.
And I think this is what play, by having this mix of teaching and play and facilitation, we keep it fresh. We
Mhm.
keep that newness to it. We keep the freedom, and we can go deep dives with the teaching and then the breadth with the play, and then it complicates it just the play sometimes. Because a whole new idea and a new possibility comes
Yeah.
up. Or like when I did we were exploring fairies and whether fairies were real or not. And they were telling me that um, fairies are real if they have wings. So I said, well, if you make wings and have wings, are you fairies then? And can you fly? And he says, yeah. So they all made their own wings. And we stood up on the table to jump off to launch ourselves into flying. Me thinking that they would all say, oh, it doesn't work. We're not fairies. They all leapt off there saying, we're flying. And I was like, okay.
Okay.
That didn't go the way I was thinking, but we went into a whole scientific exploration of what is flying.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with fairies and it stayed with fairies. And we had the whole imaginative world of storytelling and fairies and playing fairy worlds. But we experimented with flight, we experimented with
Gravity.
gravity, yeah, of course. There was all sorts of things about social justice. If you caught a fairy, do you have the right to keep it, and where would you keep it? It
Mhm.
wouldn't be allowed to be free. All of many complex things about what, because of what they look like.
Yeah.
If they didn't have wings, is it not a fairy, or is it just a wingless fairy, or has the fairies is it sick, like if you were in a wheelchair kind of thing? That's not sick, but had two different thoughts at the same time there. But all of these different really interesting teachable moments that occurred through the play and through dialogues. An awful lot of mathematics, because we were designing fairy doors and fairy playgrounds, and we had engineering and technology. They created films and they created stories. So they were writing letters to the fairies. This was all in their play. I didn't have to make them write. They wanted to write.
Mhm.
So all of these things happened. In Sweden, I don't have to teach writing, reading and writing. But most of the children, when they leave me to go on to school, they can. And
Yeah.
it's all been done through play. I hadn't forced them to do it. And
Right.
I think people forget that play is like motivator supreme. Anything, just about anything is achievable
Mhm.
if they have that as their deep down motivating force.
And if the teacher is honoring that play and
Mm,
listening for what the children are interested in, and then providing that support,
Yes.
to think about asking great questions, reading stories about fairies and or whatever it is that they're interested in.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Suzanne, we could go on for hours. This has been so wonderful. Do you have I always tell people I feel like each Porch Play Chat is like a master's course in 30 minutes. It's just crazy with all of the bubbling up information and
Mm.
reflection we're able to have from it. And so, do you have any last thoughts before I close this out?
My last thought is always to go slow. I think taking a small step in the right direction of making sure children have access to autonomous play to meet our fears head on, but do it slowly so that it is genuine and to really enjoy the process, not to see this as a chore as a teacher, but to see this as a delight. And I think also what is the most amazing thing is that you realize it's not empowering children is not taking power away from ourselves, it's giving us power. So everyone becomes empowered by empowering play and empowering children. So yeah, if you're afraid of going in the play direction, take a small step because
Just
it's
a
worth it.
baby step.
Yeah.
Beb Boz in the US would
And
say
then let it
start
get bigger and bigger and bigger.
and bigger and bigger. Beb Boz would always tell us start in a corner. Just
Yeah.
start in a corner and then expand your way out as your comfort level increases.
Mm.
Suzanne, thank you so very much. Stay right there while I close this out. So to learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.